Introduction. My story. On the final day of his sophomore year of high school, James Clear took a baseball bat to the face full speed by accident. The blow broke his nose, fractured his skull, and shattered both eye sockets. He was put into a medically induced coma as his brain swelled, and woke up disoriented, unable to recognize the simplest things. What followed was a slow climb, months of physical therapy, a lost spot on the varsity team, and the quiet question of how to rebuild. The answer turned out to be unglamorous. At Denison University, he started with the basics almost no one notices. A steady sleep schedule, a tidy room, lifting weights a few times a week, studying a little earlier than the people around him. None of it looked impressive on any single day. But the days stacked. By his final year, he was named to the ESPN Academic All-America team, one of just 33 players chosen in the entire country. The transformation did not arrive in a single leap. It was assembled out of ordinary actions compounded over time. Clear calls these atomic habits, routines small and easy to do, yet the source of enormous power, the building blocks of remarkable results. Underneath them sits a simple model of how any habit works. A cue, a craving, a response, and a reward, looping until the behavior runs on its own. From that loop, he draws 4 laws of behavior change. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. The operating manual, the rest of the book follows. The promise is modest and a little startling. You do not have to become a new person overnight. You only have to get 1% better and then do it again, because habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. The fundamentals. Why tiny changes make a big difference. Chapter 1. The surprising power of atomic habits. In 2003, British Cycling hired a new performance director named Dave Brailsford. For nearly 100 years, British riders had been mediocre. A single Olympic gold since 1908, and not one Tour de France winner in the sport's history. Brailsford's idea was almost boring. He called it the aggregation of marginal gains. Search for a 1% improvement in everything, then add them all together. The team redesigned the bike seats, rubbed alcohol on the tires for grip, and tested massage gels for faster recovery. They even painted the inside of the team truck white to spot dust that might dull a finely tuned bike. None of these moves was decisive on its own. Together they were overwhelming. Within 5 years, British cycling dominated the Olympics, and beginning in 2012, the team won the Tour de France 5 times in 6 years. The math explains why. Improve by 1% a day for a year, and you end up roughly 37 times better. Decline by 1% a day, and you shrink to nearly nothing. The trouble is that the gains stay hidden at first. Clear pictures an ice cube in a slowly warming room. At 25 degrees nothing happens, at 30 nothing happens, and then at 32 it finally melts, the same patient heat suddenly paying off all at once. He calls that hidden stretch the plateau of latent potential, and most people give up while still on it, a single step from the breakthrough. Habits are the compound interest of behavior. Their effects multiply, but only after a delay that fools almost everyone. We expect progress to be linear, so we abandon a good habit in what Clear calls the valley of disappointment, the stretch where the work is invested but the results are still hidden. This reframes how we should think about success. An outcome is only the lagging measure of a habit. Your weight lags your eating, your knowledge lags your studying, your clutter lags your cleaning. Goals are useful for setting a direction, but they are not what produces results. The system is, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Chapter 2. How your habits shape your identity, and vice versa. So many people fight the same habit for years and lose. Clear's answer is that they aim at the wrong layer. There are 3 levels at which change can happen. The outer layer is outcomes, the results you get, like losing weight or publishing a book. The middle layer is processes, what you do, your routines. The deepest layer is identity, what you believe about yourself. Most people set out to change an outcome. The habits that truly last begin at the opposite end, with identity. Consider two people offered a cigarette. The first says, "No thanks, I am trying to quit." He still believes he is a smoker hoping to become something else. The second says simply, "No thanks, I am not a smoker." The difference is small in words and enormous in effect, because behavior that conflicts with how you see yourself will not stick. The goal is not to read a book. It is to become a reader. The goal is not to run a marathon. It is to become a runner. An identity is not handed down, it is built from evidence. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. No single vote settles the election, but they accumulate, and the tally slowly becomes the story you tell about yourself. This is why clear flips the usual order. Instead of chasing a result until you finally believe in yourself, you decide who you wish to be, then prove it with small wins, one repetition at a time. A habit that is part of your identity feels like maintenance rather than sacrifice. The deepest reason to change a habit, in the end, is not to have something but to become someone. Chapter 3. How to Build Better Habits in 4 Simple Steps. In 1898, the psychologist Edward Thorndike ran a now-famous experiment with cats. He placed each one inside a puzzle box it could escape only by pressing a lever or pulling a cord. The first time, a cat clawed and squeezed at random until it stumbled onto the exit. But across repeated trials, something striking happened. The fumbling fell away. What had taken a cat a minute and a half to solve, it soon solved in about 6 seconds. Behaviors followed by satisfying consequences, Thorndike concluded, tend to be repeated. That insight became the backbone of how we understand habits today. Clear breaks every habit into the same 4-step loop. First comes the cue, the trigger that predicts a reward, the sight of your phone, the smell of coffee. The cue sparks a craving, the wish to change your internal state. You never crave the habit itself, only the feeling it promises. The craving drives a response, the action you actually take. And the response delivers a reward which satisfies you and, just as importantly, teaches your brain to remember the cue next time. Cue, craving, response, reward, around and around, until the loop runs without you. The first 2 steps are the problem phase, the last 2 are the solution phase. From this loop Clear derives the spine of the entire book, the 4 laws of behavior change. To build a good habit, make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. To break a bad one, invert each law, make it invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying. Everything that follows is simply these 4 levers applied with care. The first law, make it obvious. Chapter 4. The Man Who Didn't Look Right. A paramedic is at a family gathering when she glances at her father-in-law and tells him, with sudden certainty, that he needs to get to a hospital. He looks fine to everyone else. Hours later, he is in surgery for a blocked artery. Asked how she knew, she cannot fully explain it. Years of reading faces had trained her to see a pattern she could not put into words. That is the strange power of a practiced habit. It runs beneath awareness, fast and automatic, for better or worse. The trouble is that the same invisibility hides our own bad habits from us. You cannot change a behavior you have stopped noticing. So the first practical tool is awareness. Clear borrows a technique from the Japanese rail system called pointing and calling, where operators physically point at each signal and say its status out loud. It feels absurd, yet by moving the action from automatic to conscious it cuts errors by up to 85% and accidents by 30%. When New York brought a simpler version to its subways, birthing mistakes fell by more than half. You can do the same with a habit scorecard. List your daily habits and, without judging, mark each one as good, bad, or neutral. The point is not yet to fix anything. The point is to make the automatic visible again, because a habit must be seen before it can be changed. Pointing at your own behavior and naming it out loud, "I am about to eat this cookie, and I do not need it," drags the unconscious into the light where the first law can finally get a grip. Chapter 5. The Best Way to Start a New Habit. In 2001, researchers in Britain split 248 people into groups and tried to get them to exercise. One group simply tracked their workouts. A second also read material on the benefits of exercise. A third was asked to do one small thing: write down a single sentence stating exactly when and where they would exercise that week. In the first two groups, roughly a third managed to train regularly. In the third group, 91% did. The sentence made the difference. Clear calls it an implementation intention, and the template is simple: I will do this behavior at this time in this place. Vagueness is the enemy of follow-through. Most people think they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity. A cue that is specific in time and place is a cue you will actually notice. There is an even smoother way to install a habit, by tying it to one you already own. Clear calls it habit stacking. After I pour my morning coffee, I will meditate for 1 minute. After I take off my work shoes, I will change into my gym clothes. Your existing routines are dense with reliable cues, and stacking a new behavior on top borrows their momentum. Both tools work for the same reason. The first law is make it obvious, and the most obvious cue of all is one you have decided in advance and anchored to a moment that is already going to happen. You stop waiting to feel ready and instead let the time, the place, and the previous habit pull the new one into motion. Chapter 6. Motivation is overrated. Environment often matters more. A doctor named Anne Thorndike wanted the staff and visitors at her Boston hospital to drink less soda, but she never lectured a single one of them. Instead, she rearranged the cafeteria. Alongside the refrigerators that held only soda, her team added baskets of bottled water near every station and beside the registers. Over the following months, soda sales fell by more than 11% and water sales rose by nearly 26%, and no one had been told to change a thing. People had simply chosen what was in sight and within reach. This is the quiet thesis of the chapter. Environment is the invisible hand that shapes behavior. We like to credit willpower, but most of what we do is a response to what surrounds us, and vision is our most powerful sense. A habit triggered by a cue you encounter constantly is far more durable than one that depends on remembering. So the move is to design your surroundings. If you want to practice guitar more, stand it in the middle of the living room. If you want to drink more water, place a full bottle on every desk you pass. Make the cues of good habits obvious and unavoidable. Clear adds a subtler rule. Give each space a single purpose, because when one context serves many behaviors, the weaker habit usually loses. Your bed is for sleep, your desk for work. Over time, we stop responding to a place and start responding to who we are within it. But the place comes first. Build the right environment, and good behavior stops requiring heroic effort. Chapter 7. The Secret to Self-Control. During the Vietnam War, American officials made an alarming discovery. A large share of American soldiers had become addicted to heroin while overseas. Researchers braced for a wave of addiction back home, since the vast majority of heroin users relapse after rehab. But when the soldiers returned, something remarkable happened. Only a small fraction stayed addicted. Roughly 9 in 10 simply stopped. The drug had not changed. The environment had. In Vietnam, heroin was everywhere, the cues were constant. Back in their old American lives, those cues vanished, and the craving faded with them. The lesson cuts against a comforting myth. We praise people who seem to have iron self-control, but disciplined people are not heroically resisting temptation all day. They are simply better at avoiding it. They arrange their lives so the tempting cue rarely appears. Once a habit is wired in, it does not truly disappear. the urge can be re-triggered years later by the right sight or smell. Clear describes a woman who quit smoking decades earlier, yet felt the craving roar back the first time she went horseback riding again. Riding was where she had always smoked. So the inverse of the first law is to make the cue invisible. Self-control is a poor long-term strategy because it asks you to fight the same battle over and over. Far easier to cut the cue at the root. Take the phone out of the room, unplug the television, leave the snacks at the store. You cannot rely on forgetting a bad habit. You can make its trigger hard to find. The second law, make it attractive. Chapter 8. How to make a habit irresistible. The biologist Nico Tinbergen ran a curious set of experiments with birds. A herring gull chick pecks at a red spot on its parent's beak to be fed, but when Tinbergen waved a fake beak with 3 large red dots, the chick pecked even harder than at its own mother. He had built a supernormal stimulus, an exaggerated version of reality that the brain finds more compelling than the real thing. Modern life is full of them. Junk food engineered to be more flavorful than anything in nature. Social feeds tuned to be more gripping than ordinary conversation. To understand why, follow the dopamine. We assume it floods the brain when we receive a reward, but experiments show the bigger spike comes before in the anticipation. It is not pleasure that drives action so much as the craving for it, the wanting, not the liking. A habit becomes irresistible when the wanting runs high. One way to raise it is temptation bundling. Pair an action you need to do with one you want to do. An engineering student named Ronan Byrne rigged his stationary bike to his laptop so that Netflix only played while he was pedaling fast enough. To watch his shows, he had to exercise. You can build the same link by stacking habits. After I finish this task, I will check the scores I am dying to see, but only after the task. The principle behind the second law is that we move toward what feels attractive, so the craft is to attach the craving you already have to the behavior you are trying to build. Chapter 9. The role of family and friends in shaping your habits. In 1965, a Hungarian teacher named Laszlo Polgár made a bold claim in letters to his future wife. Geniuses are made, not born. He set out to prove it by raising his 3 daughters in an environment saturated with chess. The result was staggering. All 3 became world-class players, and the youngest, Judith, became a grandmaster at 15, younger than Bobby Fischer had been. The Polgárs did not have a rare gene for chess. They had a culture in which chess was simply the normal, admired thing to do. That is the deeper force in this chapter. The most attractive behavior of all is the behavior that earns belonging, because nothing pulls on a human being like the wish to fit in. We imitate 3 groups in particular: the close, meaning family and friends, the many, meaning the wider tribe, and the powerful, meaning those with status we admire. The pull of the group is enormous. In the classic conformity experiments by Solomon Asch, ordinary people gave answers they knew were wrong simply because everyone around them did. Most caved at least once. We would often rather be wrong with the crowd than right by ourselves. Clear's practical advice follows directly. Join a group where your desired behavior is the normal behavior, and where you already share some common ground. When getting fit, or reading, or saving money is just what your people do, you no longer have to fight your environment. The habit and the sense of belonging start pulling in the same direction, and that is a current worth swimming with. Chapter 10. How to find and fix the causes of your bad habits. Every craving, Clear argues, is the surface of a deeper motive. You do not really crave a cigarette or a scroll through your phone. You crave the relief, the connection, or the calm underneath. Habits are modern-day solutions to ancient desires, to conserve energy, to win approval, to reduce uncertainty. Because the underlying motive never changes, almost any behavior can be attached to it, which means a habit's pull depends heavily on how you frame it. The same prediction, relabeled, becomes a different feeling. Take the word choice we make about hard things. Most people say they have to wake early, have to make sales calls, have to cook dinner. Swap have to forget to, and the chore quietly becomes an opportunity. You get to build a body, get to grow a business, get to feed your family. A man in a wheelchair once reframed it perfectly. He was not confined by the chair, he was liberated by it. Nothing about the facts changed, only the story laid over them. You can go further and build a motivation ritual. Do something you already enjoy immediately before a hard habit, and over time the good feeling spills onto the task. The same trick runs in reverse for bad habits. Make them unattractive by highlighting the costs you usually ignore. Alan Carr's famous guide to quitting smoking does exactly that, patiently reframing every supposed benefit until the cigarette looks like what it is. The second law, in short, is not only about adding appeal. It is about pointing the mind at the appeal that is already true. The third law, make it easy. Chapter 11. Walk slowly but never backward. A photography teacher named Jerry Yulesman once ran an experiment with his university students. He split the class in two. One half, the quantity group, would be graded purely on how many photos they produced. 100 shots earned an A. The other half, the quality group, needed to make just a single near-perfect image to earn the same grade. At the end of the term, a surprise, nearly all the best photographs came from the quantity group. While the quality students sat theorizing about perfection, the quantity students were shooting, developing, and learning from hundreds of mistakes. They improved by doing. This is the difference clear draws between motion and action. Motion is planning, researching, strategizing. It feels like progress and protects you from failure. Action is the thing that actually produces a result. We slip into motion because it lets us feel busy while avoiding the risk of doing the work badly. But habits form through repetition, not preparation, and what matters is not how long you have practiced but how many times. A behavior becomes automatic only after it has been performed often enough to cross what Clear calls the habit line. The implication is freeing. You do not need the perfect plan or the perfect first attempt. You need reps. Stop preparing to start and start. The third law is make it easy, and the easiest, most underrated way to make a habit easy is to lower the bar for beginning and then simply repeat it, walking slowly perhaps but never standing still. Chapter 12. The Law of Least Effort. Energy is precious, and the brain is wired to conserve it. Given two similar options, people reliably choose the one that takes less work. This is the law of least effort. It sounds like a flaw, but it is actually a lever. If you want a behavior to happen, do not try to summon more willpower. Reduce the friction standing between you and the act. Make the good habit the path of least resistance, and you will follow it almost by default. Clear illustrates the power of friction with the rise of Japanese manufacturing, which obsessively stripped wasted motion out of its factories until its products overtook rivals that had relied on sheer effort. We are wired by evolution to spend as little effort as possible, so between two paths we drift toward whichever costs less, which is why making the good habit the easy one matters more than any burst of willpower. The same logic scales down to a single life. To eat healthier, chop the vegetables right after you shop so dinner is nearly assembled. To exercise in the morning, lay your clothes out the night before. Each removed step makes the habit a little more inevitable. The inverse works for bad habits. Add friction and they quietly fade. Take the batteries out of the television remote and stash them in a drawer. The 20-second delay is often enough to stop a mindless hour. One man Clear describes treats his home this way, resetting each room after he uses it so the next good action is always primed and waiting. The principle is to engineer your defaults. We tend to imagine that big results require big effort, but under the third law the real skill is subtraction, designing the moment so the easy choice and the right choice become the same choice. Chapter 13. How to Stop Procrastinating by Using the 2-Minute Rule. The choreographer Twyla Tharp begins every day the same way. She wakes before dawn, puts on her workout clothes, walks outside, and hails a cab to the gym. She insists that the ritual is not the workout, it is the cab. Once she has given the driver the address, the hard part is over. The morning's momentum is locked in. That small, automatic first step is the whole secret, and Clear turns it into a rule. When you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. Read before bed becomes read one page. Do 30 minutes of yoga becomes take out the yoga mat. Run 3 miles becomes tie my running shoes. These are deliberately, almost absurdly small, and that is the point. A habit must be established before it can be improved, and you cannot improve a habit that never happens. The 2-minute rule lowers the cost of beginning until starting is easier than not starting. Of course you want to do more than 2 minutes, and usually you will once you have begun. But the trick only works if you are willing to let the 2 minutes be enough on a hard day. The goal at first is not to achieve. It is to show up, to become the kind of person who never misses. Master the art of starting, and the rest tends to follow. Standardize before you optimize. Make the habit easy and reliable, then, once it is rooted, let it grow. Chapter 14. How to make good habits inevitable and bad habits impossible. In the summer of 1830, Victor Hugo was hopelessly behind. He had promised a publisher a new book and spent a year doing everything but write it. With the deadline looming, he tried a desperate trick. He had his assistant lock away all of his clothes, leaving him nothing to wear but a large shawl. Unable to dress and go out, Hugo stayed at his desk and wrote, and finished The Hunchback of Notre Dame weeks early. He had used what Clear calls a commitment device, a choice made in the present that locks in better behavior in the future. The genius of a commitment device is that it shifts the work from the heated moment, when willpower is weakest, to a calm moment beforehand, when you can think clearly. You buy single servings instead of family-size bags. You ask the restaurant to box half the meal before it arrives. You schedule the spin class and pay in advance so skipping costs money. Each one makes the good path inevitable and the bad path a genuine hassle. The most powerful version is automation, a one-time action that keeps paying off. Setting up an automatic transfer to savings, unsubscribing from the emails that tempt you, installing a timer that cuts the internet at bedtime. Do the work once, and the good behavior happens without you. The deepest application of the third law, then, is to become the architect of your future choices rather than their victim, designing a world in which doing the right thing requires no willpower at all. The fourth law, make it satisfying. Chapter 15. The Cardinal Rule of Behavior Change. In the late 1990s, a public health researcher named Stephen Luby went to Karachi, Pakistan, one of the densest, poorest cities on Earth, to fight the spread of disease. The intervention was not a new drug. It was soap, but not just any soap. Partnering with a company, his team handed out a premium soap that lathered richly and smelled wonderful, turning the dull chore of hand-washing into something people actually enjoyed. Hand-washing rates soared, and childhood illnesses fell dramatically. Years later, the habit had stuck. The soap worked because it made the behavior immediately satisfying. This is what Clear calls the cardinal rule of behavior change. What is immediately rewarded is repeated, and what is immediately punished is avoided. The catch is that our brains evolved in an immediate return world, while many modern habits pay off only later. Exercise is good for you in a year. The discomfort is now. Saving money helps your future self. The sacrifice is today. Because the reward is delayed, the habit feels unsatisfying, so it withers. The fix is to add a small, immediate reward to a habit whose real payoff is far away, to give the ending a pleasant punctuation. Skip a purchase and move that money into a vacation fund you can watch grow. Finish a workout and savor a moment of something you enjoy. The reward must reinforce your identity rather than contradict it. Rewarding a hard week of dieting with a tub of ice cream sends the wrong vote. Make the last moment of a good habit feel like a small win, and your brain will want to come back. Chapter 16. How to Stick with Good Habits Every Day. In 1993, a young stockbroker named Trent Dursmit took a job at a bank and kept 2 jars on his desk. One held 120 paper clips. The other was empty. Each time he made a sales call, he moved a single clip from the full jar to the empty one, and he did not stop until the first jar was empty. The motion was tiny, but watching the clips pile up was strangely satisfying, visible proof that he had done the work. Within a year and a half, he was bringing millions into the firm. He had stumbled onto habit tracking, one of the most reliable ways to make a habit satisfying. A simple mark on a calendar does 3 things at once. It is obvious, it is attractive, and it is satisfying, because the growing streak becomes a small reward in itself. Still, track the behavior that matters, not merely the number that is easy to count. The pull of tracking can be startling. In one study of more than 1,600 people, those who kept a daily food log lost twice as much weight as those who did not, as if the simple act of recording reshaped the behavior it measured. Benjamin Franklin carried a little book to score his virtues each day. The comedian Jerry Seinfeld is said to have written a joke daily and refused, above all, to break the chain. The streak becomes something you protect. But every streak eventually breaks. You travel, you get sick, life intervenes, and here Clear offers the rule that matters most. Never miss twice. Missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the start of a new, worse habit. The first lapse is rarely what ruins you. It is the spiral afterward. So you do not need to be perfect. You need to be consistent, and when you stumble, you need only to get back on the very next day. Chapter 17. How an accountability partner can change everything. If we repeat what is rewarded, we avoid what is punished, and the 4th law can be inverted to break a bad habit by making it immediately unsatisfying. The most reliable way to add that sting is to make the cost public. An entrepreneur named Brian Harris does this with what Clear calls a habit contract. Harris wrote out his goal to reach a certain weight, listed the penalties for missing it, and signed it together with his wife and his trainer, who agreed to hold him to it. Falling short would now cost him money and, worse, embarrassment in front of people whose opinion he cared about. With those witnesses watching, he reached the goal. A habit contract works because it borrows a force stronger than private willpower. We deeply dislike being judged by others. An accountability partner turns an invisible private failure into a visible social one, and that immediate cost reshapes the behavior in real time. Even the lightest version helps. Simply telling a friend your plan, or asking someone to check in, raises the price of quitting. The sharper the consequence and the sooner it lands, the better it works. A punishment that arrives next year changes nothing, but one that arrives this afternoon, in front of someone you respect, changes a great deal. The 4th law, taken whole, is about engineering feedback. Making good habits feel rewarding now, and making bad habits feel costly now, so that the present moment finally pulls in the direction your future self would choose. Advanced Tactics. How to go from being merely good to being truly great. Chapter 18. The truth about talent. When genes matter and when they don't. Stand the swimmer Michael Phelps next to the distance runner Hisham El Guru, and the contrast is almost comic. Phelps is 6'4". El Guru stands 7 inches shorter. Yet, oddly, they have the very same pants inseam. Phelps has a long torso and short legs, perfect for slicing through water. El Guru has long legs and a short torso, perfect for distance running. Each is among the greatest in history, and each would be merely ordinary in the other sport. The lesson is not that genes decide your fate. It is that genes decide where your advantages lie. They do not determine your destiny. They determine your areas of opportunity. The practical move is to pick the right field, to play a game that rewards your particular strengths. When you compete where you are naturally suited, the work feels easier and the habits stick, because effort is amplified by fit rather than fighting it. And if no existing game suits you, Clear suggests inventing one by combining your skills until the competition is one only you can win. Finding that fit takes experimenting. A balance Clear frames as explore and exploit. Early on, sample widely to learn what works. Later, pour your energy into the strengths you have found. And if you are not the best at any single thing, you can still win by stacking a few skills no one else combines. The cartoonist Scott Adams built his career not by being the funniest writer or the finest artist, but by being good enough at both at the same time. Genes are not an excuse to coast, since they reward those who train hardest. But they are a clue. Choose the arena where your nature and your effort point the same way, and ordinary discipline starts producing extraordinary results. Chapter 19. The Goldilocks Rule. How to Stay Motivated in Life and Work. Steve Martin spent roughly 18 years building one of the most successful comedy careers in history, and he did it the slow way. He began as a boy selling guidebooks at Disneyland and then added, year after year, just a minute or two of new, tested material to his act. Each season the challenge grew in step with his skill, never so easy that he coasted, never so hard that he broke. That balance has a name. Clear calls it the Goldilocks Rule. Humans feel peak motivation when working on tasks right at the edge of their current abilities. Not too easy, not too hard, but just manageable. A tennis match against a small child bores you. A match against a champion defeats you. A match against an equal absorbs you completely. The same is true of any habit. When a routine stops stretching you even slightly, it slides from engaging into dull, and the real enemy of lasting habits is revealed. It is not failure. It is boredom. Anyone can stay motivated when results come quickly and the work feels novel. The professionals are the ones who keep going when it turns repetitive, who learn to fall in love with boredom, to show up on the gray, unremarkable days when the excitement is gone. The way to sustain a habit for years is to keep nudging the difficulty just past comfortable so the task stays alive, and then to stick to the schedule even on the days you do not feel inspired. Amateurs let life get in the way. Professionals simply continue. Chapter 20. The Downside of Creating Good Habits. Habits have a hidden cost. The very automaticity that makes them powerful can also make you complacent, because once a skill runs on autopilot you stop paying attention to whether you are doing it well. You lock in your current level and quietly stop improving. The story Clear tells is of the Los Angeles Lakers under coach Pat Riley, a team so talented it should have dominated, yet it kept falling short. Riley's answer was not to push harder but to measure smarter. He built a system in which every player tracked his own statistics and aimed to improve his personal output by just 1% across a season. Habits supplied the consistency. Deliberate measurement supplied the edge, and the team went on to win back-to-back titles, the first repeat champions in nearly 2 decades. Riley called it career best effort, and the lesson outlived the season. Mastery is never a finish line you cross, only a standard you keep raising. That pairing is the secret to mastery. Habits plus deliberate practice. To keep getting better, you have to combine the automatic with the intentional, and the tool for that is reflection and review. Periodically step back and ask what is working, what is slipping, and whether you are still becoming the person you meant to become. Clear runs an annual review of his year and a mid-year check on his integrity. Reflection guards against the other trap of strong habits, that your identity can grow rigid, so attached to one label that a single setback feels like collapse. Hold your identity loosely enough to adapt. A lack of self-awareness is poison. Reflection and review is the antidote that keeps a good habit from quietly becoming a ceiling. Conclusion. The secret to results that last. There is an old Greek riddle about a pile of coins. A single coin cannot make a person rich, so you add another, and at no single moment does one coin turn poverty into wealth. Yet keep adding, and eventually the pile is undeniable. Habits work the same way. Any single repetition is trivial and forgettable, but the accumulation changes everything. This is the quiet thesis of the whole book, stated one last time. Small habits do not add up, they compound. The 4 laws of behavior change are simply the levers that let you stack those coins on purpose. Make a good habit obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying, and you tilt the odds toward repetition. Invert each law, invisible, unattractive, difficult, unsatisfying, and you starve a bad habit out. When a habit stalls, you do not need more willpower. You need to walk through the 4 laws and find the one that is failing, the step where the loop is breaking down, and fix that. Perhaps the most freeing idea in the book is that there is no finish line. Success is not a destination you reach and then relax. It is a system you keep refining. The goal was never to read the book, or run the marathon, or hit the number. The goal is to become the kind of person who keeps showing up, because that person, repeating small and ordinary actions, eventually arrives somewhere extraordinary. Tiny changes, compounded with patience, yield remarkable results.